There's a woman named Sarah who hasn't posted a photo of herself in 4 years. Not because she lacks a camera, not because she's hiding from an ex or running from something dark. She owns a smartphone like everyone else. She has accounts on the platforms everyone uses. She scrolls, she likes, she comments occasionally, but her own face, absent, her own life, invisible. At parties, when friends pull out their phones for group photos, Sarah has perfected the art of the gentle decline. "Oh, I'm good. You guys go ahead." She smiles, steps back, becomes the photographer instead of the photographed. Some people think she's camera shy. Others assume she has body image issues. A few have stopped inviting her to things, tired of the awkwardness. But here's what nobody knows. Sarah isn't avoiding cameras because she hates how she looks. She's avoiding them because she figured something out that most people never will. Something about identity, performance, and the hidden cost of living your life as a public exhibition. She discovered that in choosing invisibility, she gained something most people in the digital age have completely lost: herself. And if you've ever wondered why some people refuse to participate in the endless show of social media, why they opt out of the visual economy of validation, this will explain the psychology behind it. Because these people aren't broken, antisocial, or afraid. They might actually be the healthiest people in the digital room. Let's establish something fundamental. We live inside a massive psychological experiment that nobody consented to. For the first time in human history, we have the technology to broadcast our faces, our bodies, our lives to potentially billions of people. And we're all guinea pigs trying to figure out what this does to us. The results? Not great. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that frequent social media users, particularly those who post photos of themselves regularly, experience higher rates of anxiety, depression, and something called comparative suffering. They're constantly measuring themselves against others, and they're always coming up short because the game is rigged. You're comparing your unfiltered reality to everyone else's carefully curated fantasy. But the people who never post photos, they've exited the game entirely. Think about what happens when you post a photo of yourself. You're not just sharing an image. You're opening yourself up to evaluation. You're asking implicitly, do you approve of me? Do you think I'm attractive, successful, happy, worth paying attention to? Every like becomes a small dose of validation. Every ignored post becomes a small dose of rejection. Your nervous system starts tracking these metrics like they matter because evolutionarily, social approval did matter. Being rejected by your tribe meant death. So your ancient brain treats every notification like survival data. The people who post constantly are stuck on what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill of external validation. They need more likes to feel the same level of satisfaction. The baseline keeps rising. The goal keeps receding. They become addicted to the dopamine hit of approval while simultaneously becoming more fragile, more dependent on strangers to tell them they're okay. But Sarah, she stepped off the treadmill years ago. She realized something crucial. If your sense of self-worth depends on external validation, you'll never have enough. The approval you seek will always be conditional, temporary, and ultimately insufficient, because the hole you're trying to fill isn't actually about likes. It's about something deeper that no amount of digital validation can touch. Here's what's fascinating about people who refuse to post photos. They're engaging in a form of quiet rebellion. They're saying no to a culture that insists you don't exist unless you're visible. They're rejecting the premise that your life only counts if it's documented and broadcast. They're refusing to reduce their identity to a curated image that can be consumed, judged, and discarded in 3 seconds of scrolling. This isn't passivity, it's active resistance. Think about how radical that is. We've been conditioned to believe that sharing is connection, that visibility is success, that if you're not posting, you're somehow less relevant. The entire architecture of social media is designed to make you feel anxious about not participating. FOMO, fear of missing out, fear of being forgotten, fear of being irrelevant. But these people have conquered that fear. They've realized that relevance to strangers is not the same as meaning in your actual life, that being seen by thousands of people who don't really know you is not the same as being truly known by a few people who matter. Sarah told me once over coffee that she stopped posting because she noticed something disturbing. She was starting to experience her life through the lens of how it would look online. At a concert, she'd be watching the band and simultaneously thinking about how to angle her phone for the best story post. On vacation, she'd see a beautiful sunset and immediately think about filters and captions rather than just feeling the moment. Her life was becoming a performance before it was an experience, and that's when she realized social media wasn't connecting her to her life. It was distancing her from it, so she stopped. And in the silence that followed, she started to hear herself again. There's a concept in psychology called self-objectification. It's when you start viewing yourself as an object to be looked at rather than a subject doing the looking. Research shows this happens disproportionately to people, especially women, who post photos frequently. Your brain literally begins to adopt an external perspective on yourself. You become the watched rather than the watcher. You fragment your sense of self into how I appear versus who I am. This split is exhausting. You're constantly monitoring yourself, evaluating yourself, critiquing yourself through imagined eyes of imagined audiences. You lose the ability to be unself-conscious. You lose the flow state of just existing without performing. People who don't post photos have often reclaimed something precious, presence. They can be at dinner without thinking about the lighting. They can have experiences without narrating them. They can exist in moments without the secondary layer of, how will this look to others? This isn't about being antisocial. It's about being present, fully inhabiting your actual life instead of the performed version. And here's the irony. The people who don't post often have richer, more authentic experiences because they're not mediating everything through the lens of an audience. They're not asking, will this make good content? They're asking, am I enjoying this? One is performance, the other is living. Now, not everyone who avoids posting does it from a place of Zen-like presence. For many, it's protection. Some people learned early that visibility means vulnerability, that showing yourself invites judgment, that putting yourself out there hands people ammunition to hurt you. Maybe they posted once and got cruel comments about their appearance. Maybe they shared something personal and it was mocked. Maybe they watched someone they loved get torn apart online and decided, not me, never me. This is what psychologists call learned avoidance. It's a defense mechanism, and honestly, it's often rational. The internet can be vicious. Posting photos means opening yourself to the entire spectrum of human response, from genuine connection to sociopathic cruelty. Some people calculate that equation and decide the potential harm outweighs the potential benefit. They're not wrong. Sarah had a friend who posted a photo celebrating a personal achievement. Within hours, people she went to high school with were in the comments, tearing her down, dredging up old gossip, projecting their own insecurities onto her moment of joy. Sarah watched this happen and thought, what is the point? Why would I volunteer for that? So she built a boundary. Her life, her image, her moments remained hers. Not because she was hiding, but because she was protecting something valuable from a space that often doesn't respect value. This isn't antisocial behavior. It's self-preservation in a hostile environment. There's another dimension to this: temperament. Introverts and highly sensitive people often avoid posting photos, not because they're insecure, but because the entire process is energetically expensive. Posting isn't just clicking a button. It's managing responses. It's monitoring reactions. It's being on in a way that drains certain nervous systems. Even positive attention can feel overwhelming when your threshold for stimulation is lower. For introverts, social media often feels like being at a party that never ends. The notifications, the comments, the expectation to perform enthusiasm, gratitude, engagement, it's exhausting. And unlike extroverts, who gain energy from interaction, introverts deplete their reserves. So they opt out, not because they don't like people, but because they need to conserve their social energy for interactions that actually matter. In-person conversations with close friends, deep one-on-one connections, experiences that feed rather than drain. They've made a calculation. The shallow engagement of social media isn't worth the energetic cost. They'd rather have 3 meaningful conversations than 300 shallow ones. And in a culture that equates quantity with success, that's misunderstood as withdrawal. But it's actually wisdom. It's knowing yourself well enough to honor your limits rather than performing someone else's idea of normal. Here's something that will blow your mind. The people who never post photos might actually be more authentic than those who post constantly. Think about it. When you curate a photo for posting, what are you doing? You're selecting, filtering, framing, editing. You're choosing the angle that makes you look best, the lighting that hides flaws, the caption that sounds clever, the emoji that signals the right emotion. You're constructing a version of yourself for public consumption. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's not authentic. It's performance. The people who refuse to participate have often rejected this performance. They've decided that their authentic self, the messy, unfiltered, complicated reality of who they are, cannot be captured in a photo, and they'd rather be unknown than misrepresented. This is what philosophers call authenticity anxiety. It's the tension between who you actually are and who you present yourself to be. The bigger the gap, the more psychological distress you experience. People who don't post have often closed that gap by refusing to perform altogether. They're not pretending to be anything other than what they are. And since what they are cannot be reduced to an image, they simply don't try. This takes enormous confidence. It takes being secure enough in your identity that you don't need external reflection to confirm it. It takes trusting that your value exists independent of whether anyone sees it or acknowledges it. In a culture addicted to visibility, that's almost revolutionary. Let's talk about what happens in the absence of constant social feedback. Research in neuroscience shows that solitude, when chosen rather than imposed, has profound benefits. It allows for something called default mode network activation, which is when your brain enters a state of self-reflection, meaning-making, and creative insight. This state cannot happen when you're constantly in social mode, constantly responding to external stimuli, constantly performing for an audience. It requires withdrawal, silence, space. The people who spend less time posting and more time in solitude often develop what psychologists call high intrapersonal intelligence. They know themselves deeply. They understand their patterns, motivations, fears, and desires in granular detail. They've done the internal work that most people avoid because they're too distracted by external noise. This self-knowledge becomes a superpower. It means you're not easily manipulated by trends. You're not swayed by what's popular. You're not desperately seeking approval because you've already approved of yourself. But solitude also carries risk. Extended isolation can lead to rumination, depression, and distorted thinking. The key difference is agency. Chosen solitude is nourishing. Forced solitude is painful. Sarah chooses her invisibility. She's not hiding from connection. She's protecting her interior life so that when she does connect, it's genuine, deep, and meaningful rather than performative, shallow, and exhausting. But let's not romanticize this too much, because there's a shadow side to being invisible. Some people don't post photos, not because they're confident, but because they're terrified. Terrified of judgment, terrified of rejection, terrified that if people really saw them, they'd be found lacking. This is avoidant behavior masquerading as choice, and it's worth acknowledging because not everyone who opts out of visibility is doing it from a place of strength. Some are doing it from a place of fear. These people long for connection, but don't trust it. They want to be seen, but are afraid of being seen. They exist in a painful paradox. Invisible by necessity, lonely by consequence. The difference between Sarah and these individuals is agency. Sarah could post if she wanted to. She has the confidence. She's made a conscious choice. But for others, the choice isn't really a choice. It's a defense mechanism that's become a prison. If you're reading this and recognize yourself in that description, here's what you need to know. Your fear is valid, but it's also a cage. Visibility is vulnerable, but vulnerability is also how connection happens. You don't have to broadcast yourself to the world, but you might need to let a few people see you, because complete invisibility, when it stems from fear rather than choice, is a form of slow disappearing. And you deserve to exist in the world, not just observe it from the shadows. So what do we do with all this? How do we navigate a world that demands visibility while honoring the part of us that craves privacy? Here's the truth. There's no universal answer. Some people genuinely thrive on social media. They use it to connect, create, and share in ways that enrich their lives. And that's valid. But if you're someone who feels pressured to post, who experiences anxiety around visibility, who feels like you're performing a version of yourself that doesn't quite fit, here's what I want you to know. You don't owe anyone your image. You don't owe anyone access to your life. Your value does not depend on being seen. The people who truly matter will know you exist without needing to see you perform. The relationships that sustain you will happen in real space, with real presence, not through curated highlights. And if you choose invisibility, if you choose privacy, if you choose to live your life offline, that doesn't make you less than. It makes you someone who understands that worth is intrinsic, not performed. That authenticity is internal, not broadcast. That meaning is found in depth, not visibility. So what is the rare trait that people who never post photos possess? It's this: internal validation. They've developed the ability to know their own worth without needing external confirmation. They've built an identity that's stable, coherent, and self-sustaining. They don't need mirrors because they can see themselves clearly from within. In a world where most people are desperately seeking approval from strangers, where self-worth has been outsourced to algorithms and metrics, where identity has become performance, these people have remembered something ancient and essential. You are not what people see. You are what you know yourself to be. And that knowledge, that deep internal certainty, is what allows them to exist peacefully in their invisibility. They're not hiding. They're not afraid. They're simply secure enough in themselves that they don't need to prove anything to anyone. Sarah doesn't post photos because she doesn't need to. Her sense of self isn't dependent on external validation. Her life has meaning independent of whether anyone witnesses it. Her identity exists fully formed in the quiet space of her own consciousness. And in a culture that screams, "Look at me," that quiet confidence is not just rare, it's powerful, it's free, and it might just be the sanest response to the madness of our digital age.